This time I call meeting to order. Do you have an invocation?
Father, we love you. We thank you for today. Can't help but ask you to help our nation, help with those in Afghanistan, our soldiers. We say thank you for them, cover them, and Lord, for this meeting. We just thank you for those that serve, the decision makers, and all the planning that's gone into it. We thank you for our community. We ask your blessing on everything. Your will be done in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Did add information to the packet related to the sales tax resolution, but the agenda items remain the same.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Hatch to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to public comments. This is the time where citizens are encouraged to speak publicly. We request that you state your name and address, speak respectfully, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone in the public that would like to make a comment? Seeing none, hearing none. Moving on to the action agenda, the minutes of August 4th, 2021 meeting. So moved by Commissioner Belton, second by Commissioner Wentz to approve the minutes for the August 4th, 2021 meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to appropriation ordinance number 15.
Quick question on the eminent domain posts for those newspapers were super expensive. Was that just 1 week's worth of
They
posting?
charge, yeah, I figured somebody would see that.
I know.
They charge by the word, unfortunately, and they were in, so in a situation like this, we have to make sure that it has to be in broad circulation.
Yeah.
So I had to use the dispatch down, and when they came back, I said, I just want it just has to be published once, like, yeah, that is for once, so. Yeah, it's, that's kind of across the board. I've had to do publications in Kansas City, and it's been upwards of $3,000 to $4,000. A little outrageous.
Move to approve appropriation ordinance number 15.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Wentz to approve appropriation ordinance number 15. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to the 2020 audit presentation.
Good evening. I am Neil Phillips, Jared Gilmore and Phillips, prepared your independent audit for this year. Has everybody got their booklets in front of them? Let's dive straight into the audit report and we'll come back to those letters that are in there. The first paragraph talks about what we audited, being the city of Concordia as of December 31st, 2020. The second paragraph talks about management's responsibilities and the fact that all the numbers in here are your numbers, your representation for what happened during the year and how you ended the year. The next couple of paragraphs talks about the auditor's responsibilities. And you're going to notice a change this year because we followed the U.S. government auditing standards in addition to the regular auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. Because you had more than $750,000 of federal money that you spent as a city, there was another layer of testing that we had to do. So we actually had to follow the government auditing standards on top of the regular stuff that we did. The next couple paragraphs at the bottom of that page talk about what they call an adverse opinion. because in the state of Kansas, we do not prepare our financial statements on GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. We prepare them on the Kansas cash basis and budget laws. And actually, they refer to that as the regulatory basis of accounting. So if you turn to page 2, second paragraph down, that is what they call an unmodified opinion on the regulatory basis of accounting. So what that means to you is based on the testing we did, we feel like you have a materially accurate representation of what happened during the year and how you ended the year without any further modification being needed. The slang term would be a clean opinion, best opinion you can actually get. The next couple paragraphs talk about the supplemental information and our responsibility with such. And as you read through that, you're going to see that we do take responsibility for everything that's in the bound document. And then the very last paragraph on page 3 talks about government auditing standards, tells you we did follow those additional rules, and there are some additional reports that are out there. What you're going to see is we're going to have it bound in the same document where some auditors actually hand you 2 sets of reports, one for the AICPA and one for the government auditing standards. They call it a single audit reporting package, so we think it makes better sense to put it all in the same document. So this is just telling the readers of the financial statements that those reports are out there, but you're going to see them bound in this same document. So if we turn to the next page, page 4 and 5 is where we spend the majority of our time. Page 4 and 5, it's defined by the state of Kansas that this is to show users at a glance that you're in compliance with the cash basis laws of Kansas. Cash basis meaning we cannot obligate the funds if we do not have the cash in the fund. As you glance down through, it's the 4th column over, ending unencumbered cash. You glance down through there, if any of those were negative, that would be what they call a violation of Kansas statutes. As you're glancing down through there, though, you can see the Brown Grand project actually did end negative. There are a couple exceptions to that rule. One would be a grant agreement in place, reimbursement type of agreement, or if you have bond proceeds or loan proceeds that you're waiting on. In this case, you did have the agreement with the Brown Grand Hotel project, and so those monies were coming back in, and so that was not considered what they call a violation of Kansas statutes. As you're glancing down through this statement, though, I like how they've changed up the order and the presentation and how they name this stuff. Like the very top line is your general fund. Your general fund would be your streets, your parks, the utility offices there, the administrative. You can see we started the year out with $827,000 of unencumbered cash. We brought in cash receipts of 6.3, and we spent 6.1. So our ending unencumbered cash ended at $1,007,000. So we ended positive. That's a good thing. As you glance through there, we have a lot of cities that work towards trying to get at least 2 to 3 months of carryover there. When you're thinking about the general fund, you don't get your first tax payment till the end of January. So you've got to carry enough cash over in that fund to be able to pay all of your bills in January before that first tax payment comes in. So it is important that we do have cash carryover. In your case, you're just sitting with just a hair under 2 months worth of cash. And I say that by taking the 6.1 divided by 12 and then taking that 550 and dividing that by the $1,000,007. Then the next section of that is what they call the special purpose funds. And I like the way they name these because all of these dollars have a specific purpose. Because when we get down to the bottom, you're going to see that we have a total of $8.4 million. A lot of times the general public will say, well, wait a minute, you've got $8 million. Why are you not doing this? Why are you not doing that? Well, it's because of some of these restrictions, like your special purpose funds. Each of those funds are dollars that have came in for that specific purpose. The easiest one to usually describe is the third one down there, the special highway fund. Anytime somebody puts gas in their car in the state of Kansas, some taxes go to the state in the form of gas tax. And it turns around and comes back to you based on your population, and you can spend that money on only streets and highways. We have a water line break. We can't spend that money to help repair that water line. We can only spend it on streets and alleys. And you can see there, that's it started the year out with 131, brought in 132, spent 126. So $137,000 of that money sitting there is restricted for the streets and alleys. Goes down through all the different special purpose funds. You've got your bond and interest funds, and then you've got some capital project funds. When you're glancing through those capital project funds, you're going to see that's where the majority of your increase in cash came from. The water treatment facility project, you did issue those bonds in 2020, and you had not, but just barely started the project there at the end of 2020. So actually you get carried over and into the new year, $4.7 million of unencumbered cash. Then the last section of that is what they call business funds. They changed the name to business funds because they want you to know that once you pay all the bills of that utility fund, there's a state statute out there that says you can do anything you want with the profits. Now, I always talk about the fact that we've got to have cash carryover. We don't want to just spend that money because we've got profits sitting there. Our infrastructure is getting older, and we've got to have some money to help leverage. If we go out and get a loan, they're going to require a piece of it, or even a grant. They're going to require a small local portion that you've got to have some seed money to be able to do those type of projects. But actually ended the year with the water and sewer fund. Started out the year with 654, brought in 1.5, spent 1.3, and ended the year with $931,000 in the water and sewer fund. Comes all the way down to the total of the $8.4 million. We do add back accounts payable because the expenditures there include accounts payable, or what they call those obligations. So if you approve the expenditure in December, it gets included in those expenditures. Accounts payable gets included in there. You add that back, and then there's your reconciled cash balances down below there at the bottom to make up the total of the $8.8 million of cash you had in the bank. The next few pages, pages 6 through probably, I'd say 18, 19, are the words, the footnotes to back up the numbers. Footnote number 1 talks about significant accounting policies. It really talks about what regulatory basis of accounting is. If you pick up any audit in the state of Kansas, you're going to see the same footnote in footnote number 1, because it talks about, 1, what we are as a city, how we're accounting for our regulatory funds, what Kansas cash basis means. There's a budgetary schedule there on the next page. Where you actually get on page 9, footnote number 2, there at the bottom of the page, starts into information that is specific to you. And first we talk about stewardship, compliance, and accountability. And we talk about violation of Kansas statutes. As you read through that paragraph, you are going to see that we talk about statement number 1 did appear to have a violation of Kansas cash basis laws, but it did meet the criteria and therefore was deemed not to be a violation of Kansas statute. So we give a description there of the KSA that allows you to go negative in that fund. The top of the next page talks about deposits and investments. We are limited in the state of Kansas of how we can invest our money, where we can invest our money. We list out the statutes there in a quick synopsis of the different requirements. We do talk about the fact that all of your monies are secured at year end. That is a state statute that the bank secures your money. You are responsible for monitoring that. But when I say that, that means that if a bank would fail, that you would be insured to get all your monies back. FDIC steps up and covers the first 250. After that, we get securities pledged. The bottom of that page talks about the capital lease that you have for a copy machine. I actually like the presentation that's on page 11 better. The presentation of the capital lease, which is the very bottom one, it shows the beginning balance, the principal payments, the ending balance, and any interest that you paid. On page 11 there, when you're looking at that long-term debt, it's broke down Basically, that is all the loans or the mortgages that the city has. You can see we started the year out with $4.8 million. We did issue the 2020 series bonds. They for $4,045,000. We paid our debt down by 1.2, so actually ended the year with $7.6 million. And we paid $141,000 of interest there. Now on the next page, that shows the payout of those loans or mortgages or bonds, however you want to say it. And you're going to see that it's the next 5 years. Then it's in 5-year chunks after that, because most of your planning is done in 5-year phases. But as you glance down through there, you can see next year we're going to owe about in total principal and interest $923,000. Then we're scheduled for $624 in 2022, 2023 $531, $531 for 24, $535 for 25. But it kind of shows you some planning there so you can know when some of your loans are going to pay off. Like the 2012 is going to pay off in 2022. The 2011, actually, you make your last payment there in 2021. The 2012B also pays out in 22. So it's got some good information there. All right, I'm not going to sit and go through the rest of these footnotes with you. You can read through those. It's mainly support for the additional numbers that you have in there. I'm going to have you turn, in the interest of time, I'm going to have you turn back to page 19. Page 19, again, is defined by the state of Kansas to show users at a glance that you are in compliance with the budget laws of the state of Kansas. As you look through the last column over there, as you glance down through there, if any of those were over budget, you'd be in violation of Kansas statute. As you glance down through there, you can see that we were under budgeted in all the different budgeted funds. Like the general fund, we actually published a budget, had public approval for $5.1 million. We had some budget credits. Budget credits are usually refunds or grants. So that expanded our budget to 7.1 million, and we spent 6.1. So actually we were under our approved, publicly approved by statute budget by $1,010,000. It's got all your different funds there. Then the next majority part of the book, probably about 24, 25 pages there, are the detail. This is the information that you have already seen. You're going to see that we didn't make any audit adjustments. The numbers where you last seen them are where they show up in the audit today. But like the very top line on page 20 is ad valorem taxes. We throw a 2019 column in there so you can have some comparison. Like 2019, we collected $836,000 of property taxes from our citizens. In 2020, we collected $871,000. But we had actually levied, which is the budget column, $891,000. So we actually, that very last column, that negative $19,741, that is our citizens that did not pay their property taxes during 2020. So the hope is that they come in on that next line down. That next line down is delinquent taxes. You can see in 19, we collected 12,000. In 2020, we collected 13,000. So the hope is in 2021, you're going to collect that $19,000 that's sitting there from that top line. That'll be your delinquent taxpayers that pay in subsequent periods. But as you're going through this budget process and these schedules, they all match up with the state budget form. So that's the format that we use here so that it matches up. When you get the budget, probably tonight, or you may have already seen that, it will follow this same format, such as departments showing personnel, contractual commodities, capital outlay. So I'm not going to go by fund through this with you. If you turn to page 49, I'm going to fly through quite a few pages there, don't we? Page 49 is the first of the section. Because we are following government auditing standards, we have the additional reports and schedules that we're required to prepare. The first one on 49 there is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So that is the federal money that you spent as a city during this last year. It's got a column there for provided to subrecipients, receipts, disbursements. And it's broke down by the different U.S. departments, U.S. Department of Transportation, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, and then U.S. Department of Treasury, which your CARES money came through the Treasury. That'd be your Sparks money. You can see there total, we spent $1,797,000 of federal funds. That's actually coming out of the federal taxpayers' pocket. So that's always a positive. Not particularly coming out of our local taxpayers' pocket in the form of property taxes. It does, we all pay federal income taxes, so it does come out of our pockets, but it's a much bigger pocket when it's coming out of the federal side there. But a total of $1.7 thousand or $1,797,000 of federal expenditures. I think that's always a good thing to know. Page 50 and 51 is the first of the reports with the additional testing that we did. The first report is looking at internal controls and compliance at the upper city level. If we had any problems with internal controls, we didn't like the way you were doing cash receipting, we had a problem with bank reconciliations not being completed, or any issues that arose during our audit time, it would be disclosed here. And as you read through that report, you're going to see it as an unmodified report, meaning we had no modifications or no findings that we needed to report to you. Then the next page, 52 and 53, that audit report takes it down to what they call the major program level. And when I say major program, that means that's actually what they call, we have to pick one of your federal programs, call it major, and test it for compliance. There's 14 areas of compliance that we're required to test you for. Cash management, allowable cost, allowable activities, reporting. There's 14 areas in which we test you. As you read through that report on 52 and 53, it is an unmodified opinion report. And you'll note that when I was talking about the report that was on page 50 and 51, I didn't use the word opinion. The report on 52 and 53 is an opinion-based report because we do test compliance and test internal controls, meaning expenditures. We pull the invoices and make sure you've got internal controls in place to properly pay those bills. Make sure you properly procured it. Make sure that you properly reported it. All the different areas that we're required to test. It isn't an opinion-based report, and as you read through that, it is an unmodified opinion, meaning we had no problems that we needed to note. Page 54 is where everybody says I should have went in the first place with the government auditing standards report. The federal government does not like to look page by page in the audit, so they want a one-page synopsis of everything I just told you. The first bold heading that says financial statements, that was the audit report that was on page 1, 2, and 3. And as you read through there, you can see it says we had a basis for an adverse opinion, but you had an unmodified opinion on the regulatory basis. The next bold heading says internal control over financial reporting. That is the audit report that was on page 50 and 51. As you glance down through there, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, no non-compliance that was required to be reported. Then the next bold heading says federal awards. That was the audit report that was on page 52 and 53. Again, you can glance down through there, see no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies. It was an unmodified opinion. There were no findings. And then the program that we tested as major this year was your airport improvement program. And then qualify as a low risk auditee, you are marked as a no. We've got to have 3 full years of having this government auditing standards reports that are prepared. Plus we have to prepare GAAP financial statements. Somebody up at the federal level didn't think about the fact that the state of Kansas, the state of Oklahoma, there's several states, especially in the Midwest, that prepare our statements on what they call a regulatory basis in which we follow Kansas cash basis laws. So we will never qualify as a low risk auditee. And actually every city that's out there is in this same boat. Every school district out there is in this same boat. But a low risk auditee just means that we get to test less to your federal funds. Not being a low risk auditee, we are required to test at least 40% of your federal funds on an annual basis. And they look at dollar amounts. And so when you go look at your dollar amount for the airport improvement program, that met our threshold of the 40% by testing that program. Then the next two bold headings down below are any findings or question cost at both the city level and the federal level, and which you can see there are none. Then the very last page is prior year audit findings, which is also none. So there's a separate letter that was in your board copies. The commission's the only one that gets these letters. This letter that is in there is when I download it out of my system, it's called a letter to those charged with governance. So that's why it comes to the commission. Also goes to management. But our grantors don't get it. It doesn't, a copy of it doesn't go to the state. It's got a lot of good, important information in there. I'm not going to sit and read it to you because it is a boilerplate letter. We did not have any difficulties encountered. We didn't have any findings that we need to talk about, disagreements with management, uncorrected misstatements. You weren't doing anything crazy with your accounting. I'm kind of making light of that statement or that letter because it is boilerplate. It does have some good information in there that you should read through it because it is what they call a letter to those charged with governance. But again, it is boilerplate because we had no issues that arose during the audit. Then the last few pages of that is what they call the management representation letter. In the past, it used to be signed between the auditor and management. It's now required that we give you a copy of that so the commission can see what representations have been made. I always call that the reminder letter because as management reads through it, they should have talked to me about anything that's in there. Talks about things like conflicts of interest, problems with the Department of Labor, problems with the grantors, problems with the Department of Treasury, material lawsuits. You're going to read through that letter. It is a boilerplate letter because we had no modifications that needed to be discussed there, but it is required that we give you a copy of that so you can see what representations have been made between the auditors and management. It's kind of a quick presentation. You've got a lot of information there. Is there questions of me? I think you've got a really good audit set in front of you, and management does a really good job in preparing and being ready for audit and actually giving you good numbers on a monthly basis to be able to make good decisions on.
I continue to feel fortunate that we have this opportunity. It'd be difficult to imagine sitting in a space where there were a lot of conflicts and challenges. So I appreciate the audit and I appreciate the work that goes into preparing for this.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you.
All right. There's nothing else. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd entertain a motion to accept the 2020 audit.
I move to accept the 2020 audit and authorize the mayor to sign the management representation letter.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hatch, second by Commissioner Hutchinson to accept the 2020 audit and authorize the mayor to sign the management representation letter. Is there any further discussion?
Thank you again. I'm sure it's a lot of stress for the three of you.
More stress for you means less stress for me. So
You're
thank you.
well.
Hearing no further discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to resolution 2021-2120, general sales tax on November ballot.
Mayor and Commissioners, you have in front of you a proposed resolution. This was the request of the USD 333 Board of Education last time to have you pass the resolution to put a question on the November 2nd election so that voters could consider a 1% sales tax increase for the purpose of funding a portion of the school bond project, and would also result in 10% of those funds raised back to the city. So today is kind of the decision day. Now that we've talked about the scope of the project, we've talked about what that funding plan is going to look like. And before you consider a vote, I would ask that we have a discussion on how you would intend to use the 10% that would come to the city if you should pass the resolution, and if the voters should pass that sales tax. I know in your memo, I discussed how the department heads have talked about it and would recommend using that approximately additional 100,000 a year toward infrastructure and capital improvements. We know we always have a backlog on our capital improvement plan. We look at that every year for the budget. We think that using it for that purpose, which would be translated to things such as streets, sewers, that kind of thing, that would benefit the most people broadly. Most people travel through our town on a regular basis. We don't just sit at home quite a bit. So I think that would probably benefit the most people, and that was kind of our goal. Something that could be very visible, which fixing of streets and fixing of our utilities is something that's very, very visible. We figured the language of infrastructure and capital improvements would also allow you the most flexibility over the 30-year time frame, that if something were to change, it would be tied into just one specific project. We know how things have changed rapidly over the last few years, so we want to maximize that flexibility. So that's staff's recommendation. You can change that recommendation. Whatever you choose to do tonight, though, if we choose to change it, we'll need to take some time to massage that resolution language so that you can go ahead and act on that tonight. The language, if you approve the resolution tonight, if it goes to the ballot, the language that's in that resolution is what gets put on the ballot as the question. So would definitely open it up and encourage discussion at this point in time, and then would ask for your discussion and consideration of a vote on the resolution.
Anyone want to go first? Generally speaking, I think that if the resolution does move forward and it does pass, infrastructure and CIP seem to me to be the most appropriate utilization of funds. I can't think of a more specific project, and I think actually being more specific with it might hinder the ability to utilize those funds for whatever project may be more pressing at any given point in time. So I think having some flexibility without it being completely open-ended is ideal if we're moving forward.
I would agree. I think that keeping it general and gives us more flexibility. I think that's probably
Well, and people in the next 30 years, flexibility.
needs may change.
Our infrastructure won't be getting any.
Younger.
And I would add, just for those listening at home that don't dive deep into our budget, when we look at our capital improvement budget, so that would take care of things like streets and storm sewer. That overall budget is usually around 200 to 250,000 a year. So this in essence adds another 50,000 to that. And then the water fund is separate from that. So that kind of gives you an idea of about how much work could be done. And I don't know, Ron and Jeremy, you guys want to give us kind of your current estimate on what a block of redo would be? Have you an idea what that would be?
Redo.
So if you have numbers for a complete redo for a block, if you have numbers for a mill and overlay, or if you have numbers for a seal, just kind of rough estimates, I think that would help us understand too what this does for us.
Water line, water main service is usually around 200,000
Per block.
per block. Sewer is roughly 120 to 150.
I'm having a hard time coming up with numbers because prices are changing so fast. I say something, I'm gonna say complete reconstruction, 200,000 a block. On overlay. 20, 30.
I mean, one of the things that I hear often is the question, why aren't we taking care of more streets every year. You know, I mean, they're appreciative, folks are appreciative of this street taking care of this one, but there's never enough. So with that, then, is there further discussion about how to allocate the 10%? The resolution is approved, and if it is passed, is there further discussion regarding that specific element of this resolution?
I agree.
Okay, so with that being determined, then we move on to the more broad discussion of the resolution itself.
You have the resolution in your packet, and there's some findings that have to be made, and those are listed out in the packet, kind of summarized in the cover memo too. So in order to pass the resolution, you've got to find that the sales tax would provide benefit to the city and foster infrastructure. The city also has to deem it advisable to assist with the repayment of the district bonds, to pay for infrastructure improvements, and to alleviate property tax burdens on the patrons of the district and the city. You'll recall that from previous discussions. That's how the sales tax helps out and fits into the funding formula. And then also must find it advisable to put it on the city school general election ballot, which will happen November 2nd for this year. So the Mayor and Commissioners, you would have three options as you go to a vote. One would be to pass the resolution, which allows the county clerk to put the question on the ballot. You could disapprove the resolution, and if you disapprove the resolution, then I believe that it would go back to the school board, and they would have to figure out how to proceed, what they want to do, kind of back to the drawing board on things. And you could choose to table the resolution. If you choose to table the resolution and we want to take it to postpone it to a specific date, if we table it beyond September 1st, then we miss our deadline to have it printed on the November 2nd ballot. And eventually you'll have to take it up for action of approval or denial. So those are the three options that you have this evening.
Can someone remind me when the interlocal agreement, when does that negotiation happen? And
That would be after both questions would pass, then we would start negotiating that language. And that was the MOU that Dustin sent out to reform.
what happens if there's what happens if there's disagreement there? I mean, what course of action can we take as a board?
Disagreement's not an option.
Okay.
We need to come to an agreement on it. If you guys pass this tonight and it goes to the voters and the voters pass the project, we have to find a way to work together. One way or another.
So can I ask the school board or representatives, in your budget, your 48 million, I assume you have accounted for the fact that you may not get any state funding after this year? I know you're hoping to get it back up like it should be, but that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, by law, we're set for,
I'm not going to see you on the camera.
by law, we are set to have 6% state aid with the passage of November. You know, if it doesn't pass and it's beyond that, then it goes back to the drawing board, and we will likely be, we'll be at 0 next year. I mean, if it got cut in half this past year, we were 18 and then we were 13 and now we're 6. So I would assume that is the case, but once you're locked in at 6, well, when it will decrease every year. I mean, unless we fight for it and find it back, but that's going to be up to the school district budget to muster that.
Not assuming it goes back up.
Yeah, we're not assuming it's going back up.
As you know, I still question the timing of it. It's-
I believe we do need a new school.
Yeah,
That's no question at all. My hesitation is adding more taxes onto our citizens, for sure.
So I think one of the challenges is really I guess that I felt that the conversation about whether, I mean, we, in essence, then we do need to determine whether the project is worthwhile as a whole, right? That's part of approving the resolution. But ultimately, approving the resolution, what that does is give taxpayers the opportunity to vote as to whether they're willing to increase their taxes for this project. So if we go through the list, would 10% benefit the community as a whole through infrastructure? If we identify that 10% to be allocated specifically for infrastructure and capital improvements, then we could say yes. Does a project have merit? Anybody that has had the opportunity to tour our school or to visit there would, I think, agree that there is opportunity for structural improvement.
I'm sorry, with surrounding counties' taxes already being less than ours, are we gonna lose some residents to, you know, someplace that they can cut the taxes in half? Which then it doesn't help the city. I don't know.
I think I've taken a little more narrow view of this. I mean, we've been charged with making the determination of whether or not we should allow a tax to be levied for 30 years, an additional sales tax. That's all we have to decide right now. Is if we think that it would be wise for us to approve that going to the voters. And honestly, I can't answer yes to that. I mean, I know how badly we need new, updated facilities. I know that that's true. But it appears to me to tie the city's hands for 30 years. And I might not be alive at the end of that time. In fact, I probably won't. And I hesitate with that timeline. That's my concern.
Ultimately, I share that concern. My concern with that is limiting the citizens to make that decision for themselves.
But I think that's why we've been elected, is we have been elected to make a decision about whether it is prudent for the city to give that up for 30 years.
I agree.
Because I don't think most people think of that when they're looking at this.
I guess, there's a lot of thought, of course, everyone's put a lot of thought into this. I guess I go even more of a narrow view, which is, does every citizen in this community have the right to voice that opinion and take that vote? And at the end of the day, I think yes. I think that whether you're in favor of it or against it, this is the ultimate opportunity to make that decision. And it's your own fault if you don't show up and make that decision. And it's also your own fault if you don't lobby your neighbor and give them your opinion and have those thoughtful discussions. You know, how we all choose to go vote privately in the voter booth is our own business, but I do think everybody has the right to say, yeah, whether or not they'd like to move forward with it.
I think principally speaking, in the last few years, the community identified the hospital as the primary goal to work towards. And at that point, there had been some discussion of a similar sales tax that would help assist in the repayment of that. The hospital's been able to move
For
forward.
10 years. It was a special tax for 10 years.
Sure. But having the hospital having found private funding, which I don't believe that the school has the opportunity to pursue. This is the other major employer infrastructure component to our community that very much warrants improvement. So I guess my question is, and again, whether it's, does that rise then to the level of allowing taxpayers to make that decision? I think that it does, is that if as a community, we identify first healthcare, secondarily education as being the top priorities for us as a community, that was agreed to by the community. This is the tool, whether people want to use that or not. I don't know exactly, and I guess it's that unknown which would prevent us from making that good decision, since we can't anticipate what that other ask would be that a sales tax would be supporting. But in my mind, it's hard if the hospital is supporting itself and this goes to support the education, what might some other potential places for the money to go? And I can't. Infrastructure will never have enough to cover all the infrastructure needs. This will help towards that, but to put a special sales tax for the specific purpose of roads and sidewalks seems like that would be a difficult ask. That's something we're trying to do as it is now. So I'm not sure what that destination would be if we were to need this tool somewhere else. I don't know where it would be. But ultimately, that's not, I feel like my decision is whether we give that opportunity to the voters. Do we withhold this tool simply because we don't believe this is a good decision? And I have a hard time withholding that from somebody. Yes, we were elected to try to have these conversations and to make these decisions. But this is a pretty big decision that I feel like is not something that we should withhold, because we don't think it's a city that it at least passes these three questions. When I think that we can identify that it does pass these three measures.
I also think without the sales tax component, it would be devastating to have this all in property tax. I mean, it would just be horrific for those property tax payers, especially some of the bigger ones. So
I think,
it's a tough spot.
Marcia, and I was thinking about this a lot. The timing, I think, is challenging. The question, though, that I guess ultimately popped in my mind this morning is, if not now, when? The only variable that I anticipate having even a remote chance of improving to our favor is perhaps state aid. I'm more confident in the increase in interest rates, more confident in the increase in construction costs than I am confident in a potential for an increase in state aid. And so when I think about the variables to be considered, I don't think that this is a good time, but I don't think that the same project or even a reduced project in 5 years will be a better time. I think that I wasn't in the community when the elementary school was put forth. And it seems like that the community decided it wasn't a good time to spend that money then. And then in a few years later, they spent even more. And since then have spent more than they would have spent to spend that money at a bad time. More money came at a worse time. But again, is that our decision, or is that?
Yeah.
it's a good
Well,
one?
and obviously, I've thought about this a lot, like everyone else, but I also have considered the fact that we very rarely have a chance to put something that a decision we could actually make that maybe we don't agree with. Put it to the voters to actually vote. And even though they elected us to do a job, this is the one time we could allow them to have a voice. I hope that they'll vote, and I hope that they understand what they're voting on, because a lot of them won't, because they read these ballots and it goes on forever, and who knows what it says, because some lawyer wrote it. Pardon me. But
It's 100% true.
They too get paid by the word, Mark.
That just can't say this is gonna obligate the city for 30 years for this sales tax, period. I would have liked a 10-year tax, not a 30.
And I guess that's why tonight, even if it's a nod of the head from board members present, you know, especially as we kind of go into that interlocal agreement argument, which is kind of like doing the contract after we go ahead and say yes. Like, then we negotiate the contract, which is a little backwards. But will you all agree to get into a position where, you know, no changes or additions will be made without consent from this group? And I guess if there's a dollar amount or something that just makes sure that we aren't, you know, adding another building in 20 years if the bonds pay off favorably. Our intent, or my intent, sorry, I don't want to speak for everyone, is to retire this as quickly as possible. So then we can retire our sales tax as quickly as possible, because you guys are the driver, not us. And so it would be nice to have some confirmation that that's where you all are at too, at least at this point in time, and maybe can pass that down through really the generations that are going to be dealing with this.
I don't think, you know, I think for us, I think we are our own entity, you know, as a district of USD 333. We don't question a lot of what you guys do as a board. You guys need to have faith in us so that we're doing the right thing. I think the conversation that we have between the city and the school district, you know, we can have that collaborative talk, but I don't think that, my personal thing is I don't think that, well, decisions that we make as a USD 333 will inform you of what we're doing, but I don't think we need to be having any board-to-board conversation between, and have you guys have your intake on it and then our intake on it, and then you guys make decisions for us as a board.
I think what Ashley's saying though is that we have an obligation to the taxpayers and to say, you know what, no matter what, this is going to be 30 years, just get used to it. I guess if nothing else, I guess is a good faith offering would be to help impress upon our taxpayers that as two governing bodies, that we are both actively, collaboratively working together to reduce the impact of this sales tax to whatever degree possible. And that as a city commission, if we have that confidence that we are both collaboratively working towards that goal, one, it would give us greater confidence in supporting the resolution. I also think it would help improve the likelihood that our taxpayers are going to be willing to support the project. So if we can help support this as a project with the idea that if funding opportunities improve, if budgets are under, and we're able to expedite the payment of this, that we're good stewards of that tax dollars. And I think that's what Ashley's really saying, is that we can demonstrate that. Not, well, and I would imagine that you have probably something to offer legally regarding early payment. So, I mean, that might help inform the conversation.
And this may help because we've been involved in a lot of these in Kansas related to cities and school districts and how the logistics of all this works. And I will tell you that every project, to my knowledge, has performed better financially than what was originally projected. And in every situation, if there's been an opportunity to refinance because interest rates have been lower, each one of those school districts has made decisions to pay off bonds sooner, which allows obviously sales tax to fall off sooner and bonds to be repaid sooner. I don't see, again, whether that's in 5 years or 10 years, I don't know that any school board or city would be opposed to that concept and that approach. I think that there's, again, always I would say, just generally speaking, a willingness to say this has been a partnership, and if we have more revenues than what we need for debt service, the objective has always been to retire bonds earlier. And I don't see a reason why that would not be the case here because of other school districts and cities have felt the same with respect to how the revenue should be used. There's no reason to accumulate revenues, thinking about, we have property tax and we also have sales tax. There's no value to accumulate revenues because those revenues can only be used for one purpose, which is the retirement of bonds. And so if there are more revenues needed than what's the debt service of the bonds are, logically, the best solution is to pay them off.
So I think what
Exactly.
What I'm saying is
Exactly.
that 15 years down the road and you can project that you're gonna have savings like this, and then we see we can add an additional building perhaps because it's
We
within the
can't.
scope. We
You
can't.
No, you
Okay.
can't. Legally, you
That's
cannot, no, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's been my concern all along is because if these are written so generally that we can add onto the projects because it says it's just for the high school, which I get.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that we can't do that.
Actually, that's a great point. So just to be very, very clear, the sales tax can't be used for any project costs. So within the scope of the 48.5 million, sales tax cannot be used. One penny of it cannot be used to actually pay for a construction project. Sales tax can only be used for the bond repayment. Okay, so the issuance of the bonds, the 48.5 million, that pays for construction. The property tax being generated from the mill levy, as well as the sales tax, is used to pay for the principal and interest payments over the 30-year period. It is illegal to use sales tax to pay for actual construction costs.
So the envelope would contain this project solely, and you couldn't add things to that envelope
You
at
cannot
that point down the road.
The district could use other district funds, so capital outlay, for example, but the sales tax is strictly limited to the repayment of bonds. And so logistically, how that will eventually work is once the sales tax starts, you'll be getting obviously monthly distributions from the Department of Revenue. When those are received by the city will keep the 10%, and they will then send over to the school district the 90%, and that's done on a monthly basis. And then through the budgeting process, the district counts for that as it's levying taxes for each year's bond payment.
Provide some reassurance you're looking for.
So when do you anticipate selling this bond?
It's a great question. So I think the first thing is obviously the election. The second thing is if approved by voters, and keeping in mind that both questions, right? So if the school district election passes and then the sales tax, school district election does not pass and the sales tax does, they're both voting, right? So assuming a successful election, obviously with interest rate being at the current levels, I think the Board of Education would probably want to proceed in a very timely manner, considering that the largest expense related to the bond issue is interest expense. And we've assumed a 3.12% interest rate over a 30-year period. I think we'd be closer in today's market, closer to 2.8%, which is millions of dollars of difference. And so I think they would want to proceed very timely, but part of that process then is obviously the approvals of the interlocal agreement before those bonds are sold. And there's a draft, very, very rough draft of that document that obviously is out there, but will need to be worked out by both the school district and the city.
And we have that and we posed some questions back and forth with the city staff wise. We did not focus that on this past week, getting ready for the 150th. So we'll have to pick that back up here shortly.
Questions, thoughts?
Final thoughts, I guess, to the public, if this moves forward tonight, this is your chance. And make sure you make an informed decision and make sure you are vocal with your friends and family of, your reasons for your decision. If you choose. So everybody's got a shot now.
Well, not quite.
What?
Not quite yet. At this point, I would entertain a motion to approve resolution 2021-2120, either to vote it up or down, or to table the conversation.
Move to approve resolution 2021-2120.
Moved by Commissioner Belton. Is there been a second?
I'll second.
And seconded by Commissioner Hutchinson. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Aye. Aye.
The motion passes 3-2. The resolution, we move forward and the question will be asked on the ballot in November. Okay. Okay. School staff and related personnel want to stick around for a riveting conversation about conditional use permits. You're more than welcome to do so.
I think you have to. actually.
You really wanted to read this, didn't
I brought it.
you? Are you sure you got it?
Share, I'm in a copy for everybody. How are you, sir?
Okay, moving on to the conditional use permit for 129 West 6th Street.
Answering questions, is she?
I left her a message and sent her an email. She did say she was gonna be here 3 days ago. So I don't know, something may have happened. Well, the attached ordinance is a recommendation from the planning commission for conditional use permit at 129 West 6th. Application by Megan Bickman to do a dog boarding camp down there. And as I got all the material, the excerpts from the planning commission meeting, the staff report, the application, all the, for the record information. And the planning commission added a condition on the end. So we changed that and signed off, but I'll stand for any questions. If you've got any question about any of the material or.
Bruno, where does she walk the dogs? Because I don't really want her walking a bunch of dogs at the plaza. I mean, there's no green space down there other than Citizens Park area.
I don't know that those dogs will ever go outside during boarding because of the way it's set up inside. That the play and exercise areas, if you look at the plans there, they had this drain pans basically that are hooked up to the sanitary sewer system, and all the kennels have to be by law, have to be non-absorbent, sanitizable, washable material. They don't have to go outside. That would be my answer. I don't know. I mean, she's got the whole place set up to exercise. Or that's her plan, to set up a place to exercise and board and have play areas. And I don't know about training for sure, but
What's the maximum amount of dogs that she can have in that building?
well, if you look at well, there's no limit. We don't have an animal control limit that I'm aware of, but the dog boarding kennels are regulated by the state. You have to have a license to have a dog boarding kennel in the state of Kansas, and we have to have one for our own. And that license the kennel has to meet very specific requirements by the state, and they have a few regulations that they use the number 9 CFR of the federal code of regulations, which is the Animal Care Act, and it's very specific about how you treat animals, how many you can have, and how big of kennels they can be compared to the size of the dog, and those sort of things. She's got 19 kennels on there, which would be her idea in that area. She claims she wanted to start out with about 5 or 10. Technically, she can put 2 dogs in a kennel based on their size, depending on the size of the kennel and the size of the dog. The only time that ever happens is if both dogs come from the same family. If she's boarding, can't put 2 dogs from different families in the same kennel.
But at max, hypothetically, as designed, it could be up to 38 dogs.
Correct. Which would be highly unlikely.
On the handout, it said that she has done this before. Do we know, I mean, do we know for a fact that she's done this? It just concerns me that she's gonna put a boarding, the grooming, whatever, you know, but the boarding downtown Concordia is kind of a little inappropriate.
Well, it's an interesting thing, you know, I mean, this was a pretty well discussed deal during the public hearing. We had a lot of, you know, the notification area people were there. I was convinced the planning commission would go for it, but she convinced them with her answers. And it was a 4-to-1 vote. And it is, you know, based on, you know, if you read my staff report, it kind of surprised me, you know, I had a body shop deal one time too in the downtown. That's a conditional use thing. And, you know, there's a lot of concern with that. And I can just remember talking to the early planners when I first got here, before I even got into zoning. You know, the idea was to kind of keep the allowed uses downtown a little looser, but with conditions so that they would be compatible. And so it is an allowed use under conditions. So it's just a basic decision. Now, as it says in my memo, you have options. You can add conditions. You can send it back to the planning commission and ask them to explore other conditions or things like that. Or you can reject it. We did not get any protest petition signed, which I expected. It never happened. But
Protests were voiced, but they weren't specifically filed as part of the process, right? There was opposition.
correct.
voiced.
All the protests that I got in opposition of it was before the public hearing. I haven't received any after. Even verbal email. I got an email saying, hey, I want a protest petition so I can protest that. And I sent the protest petition along with specific directions and never received.
So who gets to make sure she's following whatever condition? If
Well, that was something that kind of came up too. One of the biggest concerns was barking, you know, noise with dogs. Dogs are gonna bark. So that's why one of the conditions is to address that issue. And that is one of the the only thing that I can find in the Code of Federal Regulation that it does address. It addresses sanitation, addresses temperature, inside temperature, how much exercise, it addresses the size of the kennels, addresses everything but noise. So one of the conditions is to make sure that she has some sort of acoustic material or a way to kind of alleviate that noise to any of the neighbors. Now, her plan is to put those on the upper level where there's no adjacent upper level apartments or businesses or anything like that. That can be helpful, I would think, but.
Well, I just know walking past the business while she was working in there, there was some there was dog poop on the ground for several weeks. So that right there threw a red flag to me. If you can't clean up when you're not boarding a dog, whether that be her personal dog or whatever, she obviously was in there working. And it was like for at least 2 weeks.
I don't know. I've never gotten a complaint. I had once. But I do know that planning commission did a lot of research ahead of the public hearing, and I know that when I brought it up in a study session at the previous meeting a month before, it said that this was coming down the pipe. The immediate reaction was negative. The immediate reaction was negative, and I said, well, it's on the list, it's allowed. She has the right to apply, just like a zoning change. If you want to apply, you can apply. I'll bring you through the process. But out of, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 of the absolutely not, you know, during the public hearing process, it turned completely around. Megan was my secretary there. She runs the Zoom while we have our meetings, and she was actually even surprised. She volunteers out at the dog kennel out here, so she's familiar with how that works. But
I guess I would say
annually, they have to be inspected by a licensed veterinarian to get their license from the state. One of the conditions could be to do that more often, but I don't know who's gonna do it.
Yeah, I feel, I have a lot of respect for the planning commission and for you. I feel like you all were put in a bad situation, essentially where you're having to approve this after the building was purchased. Maybe not necessarily knowing that there was kenneling before, or did you?
Well, there was
At the
kind
time
of
of purchase.
misunderstanding there. I was asked by a couple of realtors before it ever sold about some allowed uses, and I think I put copies in your packets. I sent some letters to a couple of different realtors about the allowed uses, but I don't remember ever being asked about boarding kennel. I assumed that it was like a daycare thing where while she was grooming, she'd be taken care of during the 8 to 5 business hours, because she was asked, you know, how many dogs she had at one time in her grooming business. She says up to 10. You know, 3 or 4 that she's done, and 3 or 4 in waiting, and a couple
Sure.
being groomed. And never had any issues with that. It's the first time I've heard about the poop issue, but
And I get that it's a conditional use and there's an opportunity to allow it, but unfortunately, I've also been in a situation that's not 100% similar, but was when there was a change in an ordinance. You know, having to be the neighbor, and I don't think anyone really realizes what this is. You can easily say, oh, I won't sign that protest petition because I don't want my name on something that would be anti-business, until you are the neighbor, until you are hearing the barking. I also I just did a walk by today and could hear it. I really feel terrible for the existing neighbors who put up a protest and now just feel completely defeated, who've been running a business for 15, 20 years and feel like they have been abandoned. It just makes, I know she runs a good business. I have friends who utilize her services, and they think she's great as a groomer. So that's not in question at all. But what is in question is when you get that many dogs in a space, there is smell, there is noise, and is that an appropriate thing to have in the downtown? And I understand that the planning commission, you know, when you have the person sitting in front of you, I'm sure it's harder, and you know, they can supply answers, but if you put your office right next door to that place day in, day out, you're gonna see something different. Or you could see something different, and it's much harder to draw this thing back than it is to allow it.
Commissioner Belton, I want to answer a question that you had posed in regard to enforcement, because municipal court is, you know, we deal with animal control stuff all the time. A lot of that enforcement's going to fall on Bruno and myself, and, you know, the noise complaints and stuff like that. There's states.
the barking dogs, like anywhere I've ever told anybody that's ever called and complained to me about barking dogs, this is something I'm gonna respond, because you can look at this from 2 different ways, which I always have to, but you have to understand that residences are allowed downtown.
Right.
I can have an apartment. You have to understand there is no limit on how many dogs I can have in my apartment.
Yeah, there is
No,
now.
there is.
Actually,
Is that incorrect? We put that on there?
Yep.
Okay, so there is a limit now. Okay, so I stand corrected then. But you can have 4 dogs in a residence that can be barking all the time. The response to a barking dog noise is to call the police. The rest of it, in my opinion, is the conditional use permit. But if there's a continually complaint, if the police come to me and say, "Dude, we're responding to a call every day here," which I could anticipate, especially when you get feuding neighbors that don't like how decisions are made sometimes, then you will get that as out of spite. I deal with spite between neighbors on a daily basis anymore because somebody put up a fence and I don't like it, and now I got to keep my trash cans over here instead over there. It just goes on all the time. So you're gonna get that anyway, but she is allowed to live there. She's got 3 dogs of her own. They could be barking and pooping too. So.
Yeah, it's just a difference. It's not, you can't say 3 dogs barking is the same as 38 dogs barking. It's when you hear it in a neighborhood, when one starts, they all start. If you go to there's another, of course, doggy daycare place, and it's loud all the time. If you go there, I bring my dog there, it is loud all of the time when you walk in there, and that's okay. It's out in the middle of the country and it's not bothering anyone. I just think this is a really rough spot to put your downtown businesses in, and then they don't want to be vocal about it because they don't want to discourage anyone.
Well, they've been very vocal to me. The
Yeah.
neighbors have all of them. But yet, to do the ultimate protest, you can't get 2 or 3 or 4 of your neighbors together. But yeah, I'm not worried about what I may or may not have said. I don't remember ever telling her that dog boarding kennelling was allowed, period. I don't ever remember saying that. I
can add in, when we did the walkthrough, all that was talked about was grooming and I was under the understanding it was a short time while people were at work and grooming, that it was, that's the way I took it when we did the walkthrough.
So, but even with, so then if it is just a day boarding, I'm not sure that the conflict is really reduced then. Theoretically speaking, the neighbors are going to be operating similar day hours, and so the overnight, I would think would be a tremendously greater challenge than the day issues.
Other than the fact that it probably is more dogs.
I would think that the issue would be just the same during grooming. If you're able to have 10 dogs in there while you're grooming dogs, I would think that the barking issue would be the same with that as it would be with boarding.
I mean, that's,
Unless the owners are there with them all the time, and I don't think they are. I don't know.
I think generally in those situations, they're moving those dogs back and forth, grooming them, and then they come pick them up that day.
Of course, yeah, they're in the same day.
Yeah.
On the
so
grooming
you
side.
have that likelihood of barking, yes. It's not gonna be sustained for 24-hour periods, weekends, stuff like that.
So this drawing you gave us,
That was what she did for the planning commission, the one with the floor
it-
plan,
yeah, is that 2nd floor though? You said she was talking
Yeah,
about putting these
the upper level, yeah.
on the upper level, so.
For the boarding and the play areas there where they have the mats, the disposable mats, I guess you would say, or not disposable, the water, absorbent free, non-absorbent surfaces that they put in with water.
She using the top floor as a residence as well, I've been told she was using it as a residence.
Yeah, she's got a separation requirement between the back, basically the back half of that. Back third of it is resident, 3 stories of resident.
would she need a conditional use
And
permit
it's-
if she wasn't doing the overnight boarding?
The grooming's allowed without a conditional use permit.
So what she's doing now is
Is always allowed.
is already
Yeah,
okay.
the grooming
It's just-
side's allowed.
It's just adding this, and the problem is. whether
Well,
we-
and it's the definition is of a kennel is dog boarding. It doesn't mention cat or anything, although the Animal Care Act, that the 9 CFR is animal care, and it includes cats.
So if we don't approve this conditional use permit, she can continue to move forward with her business plans of grooming and I mean, essentially, there's not a time limit per se. If I drop my dog off at 8 a.m, but it has a grooming appointment at 3, and I pick the dog up at 5, she's still permitted to conduct that business, right? mean, there's no time constraint on how long a dog could be in this business.
Would have to be picked up. The difference between
I think between 8 and 5.
yeah, between the daycare, for lack of a better term, and then this boarding would have to be that the animal that was there for that service would have to be picked up by end of business that day. Because if not, then you're going into, they're staying overnight, now we're counting.
Hypothetically, I set my business to have, I'm open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, well, no. But yes,
Why not?
I see what you're saying. And at which point in time, if that was what ended up happening, then we would have to come back and probably look at some parameters to set that. I see what you're saying, but generally that's, it's not the Casey's General Store of boarding or anything, so they're not open.
I'll be catering to clients that are working third shifts, just trying to be attentive to their needs as well.
Hey, whatever you gotta do, I'm not gonna do it, but whatever you gotta do.
I just think this kind of goes against our whole trying to beautify downtown. I hate to say no to a business opportunity for anybody. But
Right.
I've received a lot of comments on this. And no, not many are for the voice their opinion to me.
So the doggy daycare is okay with the.
Well,
conditional use
that's-
permit?
Doggy daycare doesn't meet the definition of a boarding camp because it's not there
Okay.
24/7. You know,
Gotcha.
or the opportunity to be overnight by a non, you know, not in their regular home. I tended to use the term doggy daycare because she was keeping grooming dogs there for 2, 3, 4 hours or maybe even longer sometimes if somebody dropping them off and then pick them up, especially if they're out of town or coming from a long distance or going to work and they can't be there till noon or something to pick up their dog. So that's kind of what my letter related to when we were talking about grooming, and then the other one was just basically living there, but somebody told me, come take care of my dog. You know, the fact is she's making, you know, she's wanting to do it for a business. But there's,
My question is, if we don't approve this conditional use permit, are we achieving the goal of protecting the neighbors? And I'm not sure ultimately that we are, because a lot of the daytime business that's going to be conducted could still be conducted, which would still have the same impact on the neighbors, which I guess could be complaint driven, and with complaint driven, then we might be able to do something in that regard. But that the conditional use permit doesn't protect the neighbors as they might hope it would.
Well, but just because she applied now for the conditional use doesn't mean she couldn't come back later if after we experience 6 months.
1 year,
of-
she has to wait 1 year if it's denied before she can apply again. That'd be same as a zoning change or.
But we would have the opportunity to look at it again and see if we've had a lot of complaints, you know, that type of thing too, where, and she wouldn't have spent the money to do all of this for her license.
See, I guess I wouldn't necessarily want to be next door to this. I wouldn't want to be next door, honestly, to a smoke shop. Right, but that's, we can't stop that necessarily at this point. But I guess I feel like that's on her. If she wants to spend this money and she's not going to be a good steward of her business and it's closed due to whatever kind of concerns there may be.
There she is.
That's part of the gamble.
Hi there. We're having a lively discussion. This is Miss Leitman. This is the city commission.
I think at this point, honestly, Megan, probably the podium would be the best place for you to be.
Without even staying with me, I don't care how you want to do it. Do you have some information?
Same thing. I wrote to you guys.
Okay, they have that, I believe.
Okay, I don't have anything more.
Okay. Well, I think, we were coming close to the end of the discussion. I don't know. They were making comments, so.
So I think the biggest concern that's been voiced is how to manage or how to negate the greatest liabilities, which would be sound and odor. And I think that's the primary concern. I think another concern that's been voiced is the quality of care, given that they would be primarily indoor as opposed to having any outdoor space. So those are I think the most significant concerns that have been voiced thus far,
Okay.
and kind of how to help one, whether that's a liability that we want to take on as a city, and if so, how that might be negated. And I know that you've demonstrated how you would lay that space out. So those are the concerns that have been voiced. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've done quite a bit of research. There's a lot of facilities like this all over the country, because in bigger cities, they don't have outdoor space to be able to, so I've kind of based my plans on those types of setups.
Mhm.
And I've spoken to a few owners about how do you handle barking? How do you handle, odors, space, management, all of that. And so I mean, it's mostly laid out there in my blueprint, and of course will be staffed to the point where it's all easily managed. I'm not planning to do it by myself. And it'll be staffed 24/7. So there's not gonna be a time where something could happen or a mess could be made or barking could happen that somebody won't be there to stop it and prevent it. I guess unless there's any specific questions for any of those concerns, I don't want to just sit here and ramble on and take up your time.
So like in your facility now, what's your waste management plan for where you were located? How did you?
I wasn't doing boarding in my last business location. I did it at my house, and
See you.
I wasn't doing boarding in the business. I did it at my house, and I manage it the same way you would manage any accident that happened at your house or any barking that happened at your house with your own dogs. I clean it up, I sanitize it. My neighbors didn't even know I did boarding there because the dogs didn't bark. I'm a trainer. I've been doing this for a long time, and so I have techniques and tricks to make the dogs more comfortable. Stressed dogs are the ones who bark. Anxious dogs are the ones who bark. So we go out of our way to make them very comfortable. This facility is going to feel more like a bedroom at someone's house than it would an unfamiliar, uncomfortable place. I'm setting it up to care for everybody's dogs the way I want mine cared for, and I'm very picky.
So in your old business, where you were,
Mhm.
you had dogs for grooming, but they just didn't make messes, or did you take them outside, or?
Oh, no, we took them outside to potty if they let us know that they needed to, and otherwise, if they made a mess, we just cleaned it up very quickly.
Well, my concern was no green space downtown, other than the plaza, which
Right
I
now,
don't want dogs,
right,
too many people going to sit on the grass.
right.
Need leftovers.
We are, in the blueprint there that I provided, that is going to be lined with, it's the same pool liner. It's a roll-on rubber pool liner that professionals use when they're redoing public pools. It's heavy duty, it's waterproof. That's going to be the base for the potty and play areas. And then I have artificial turf that will go down in certain spots near drains, floor drains. so that it'll trigger the dogs to let them know, hey, it's okay to potty in here even though we're inside. And so when they're running loose and playing, they're going to be on nothing but that pool liner, that rubber floor that's waterproof and it'll leak to the floor drains. And in those play areas, there are grass areas because most dogs look for grass and that's how they know this is where I go.
So you won't take them out at all?
No, and it actually negates my risk that way. We don't have to worry about a dog slipping out of their collar and getting in the street. We don't have to worry about messes outside or dirtying up public areas that way. So all of our messes and all of our dog messes will be contained and cleaned up promptly.
How many dogs at a time do you plan on keeping?
According to the plan there, sorry, I'm a little nervous.
We roughly figured you could potentially have about 30 dogs. Do you plan on?
I plan to probably not have that many at a time because the only time I would put 2 dogs in a space together would be if they're from the same household and they're familiar with each other and they get along. Most of the time, most people have 1, maybe 2 pets tops. So they're gonna be 1 to 2 dogs in each one of these spaces. But the odds of having 2 dogs in each one of them is slim to none. And
So was the boarding like an afterthought after you bought the building, or did you?
it was always my intention, and I think it was a miscommunication between Bruno and I. I thought I had asked him about it and mentioned it before I bought the building because I wanted to know for sure, can I do that in this space? He misunderstood what I was asking. And so of course he said yes, because he didn't realize I would be boarding overnight. So I bought the space and then I find out that I need a permit, and that's okay. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to see if I can do that. But I would have never bought the space had I known that this was the main plan. So.
Yeah, I think that's where, of course, we've heard from the neighbors. And the issue is, they've been in these spaces for years. And, a conditional use permit is allowed, in an area that's a commercial space that you would think maybe for kenneling would be more kind of towards the outskirts of town, or if there's a bigger buffer area. In this situation, there is no buffer area.
Well, I'm not setting it up like a typical kennel. It's not, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's 2021. People don't want to stick their dogs in a chain link run. They know that's not the best place for them. They know it's not the best way to care for them, and they don't want to worry about their pet while they're gone on their trip. A lot of dogs are on anxiety meds because they get stuck in chain link kennels like that. We're not doing that here. We're setting it up so it is more comfortable. The dogs are more pampered. People spend as much on their dogs right now as they spend on their kids. They treat their dogs like their kids, and that's what I'm looking to do. They're gonna be comfortable. They're gonna be pampered. Pampered, comfortable pets don't bark.
I guess I would argue that I think that they do. I think that dogs bark, and I think you run a great business. I heard you have. I just am very concerned for the neighbors who thought zoning was protecting them from issues like this. It's concerning to me that they are, that we're kind of changing the game after they've already been established. And I don't know, that's troublesome.
Given that, I think my thought would be with the only variable that the conditional use permit would really address would be the overnight boarding. That that the grooming business continue as is. So neighbors who are frustrated and upset, that may be something they have to continue to reconcile as the business is established. I guess I would wonder if we could place the conditional use permit on conditional use. Love to offer a pun about keeping things on a tight leash, to where if the concerns come to fruition, that there's an ability, I mean, and this would be a huge financial risk then for you, right? That if the concerns are realized, that the conditional use permit is withdrawn or restricted. And if it ends up being such that the overnight boarding is not as much of a problem or an issue as neighbors have been concerned for, then all parties can move forward in an agreeable way. But animals will be housed there or cared for there during regular business hours. The grooming is going to take place. So is there a way to see if this works or not? And if it doesn't, we know that you invested a significant amount of money to create this boarding space, but we're not going to be able to allow this overnight boarding anymore due to these concerns that are proven, demonstrated. And I mean, that to me would seem to be, my dogs are pretty spoiled. They can be vocal at times. And sometimes make messes where I don't want them to, despite numerous efforts to try to help them outside, but they're more than welcome to do whatever they need to do. So I think that the concerns by the neighbors are valid. I guess those are my-
I understand their concerns, but no one in the area has seen a facility like this. Nobody has seen a setup like this. And there are very few dog trainers in the area. I'm one of them. So they haven't seen a facility like this in the area that was run by a dog trainer. I guess that's
The other side of that, though, is that they haven't seen this.
right.
So
But I've had a lot of positive feedback from my clients that they're excited about this. They drive to Salina or Manhattan right now to get this service because it's not offered here. And they don't want to leave their dog in a chain link kennel run at the vet. So I know the market's here. I'd like to try it, and I've already got a significant risk with my investment here.
Sure.
I need to be able to give this a go. Otherwise, I got a lot of wasted space I can't use.
So how long do your dogs stay now when they're grooming?
Usually 4 to 5 hours.
So they're there a significant length of time during the day, but not as many.
Right, not as many.
Now, do you have spaces like this on the main floor for it?
No, for our grooming dogs, they just stay in a little fold up crate right in our bathers room where they're, they can see people and we can keep them quiet, and that's how it would be with the boarding as well. There'd be somebody up there 24/7 interacting with them, playing with them. We're not just gonna turn them loose in these little play areas and just let them run willy-nilly with no supervision. There's gonna be somebody with them 24/7.
So do you have people already lined up
I
if you
do.
do this?
I do. I have some employees that are working for me in the grooming salon right now. They've expressed that they would like to help with this and that they would, the duties for the dog boarding would be something they'd be happy to, add to their hours. And I also have several applications from other applicants that are waiting to hear back if I need to hire more staff.
Because it seems like every place you drive by is trying to hire people right now. And it's not an easy task.
Right. Obviously, we wouldn't take on any more dogs than we could handle with the staff we had at any given moment. And I live in the building as well, so I'm going to be there 24/7.
What type of soundproofing do you anticipate?
A lot of, they build like a 2x4 frame, they line it with insulation, and then they cover it with, what amounts to, like tarp or, painter's canvas. That way you can paint it, decorate it, make it look nice with the room, but it absorbs the sound that bounces off the walls.
You have that on the main level now?
No, I don't need it.
And according to this, between one of your neighbors, you'll actually have a storage room.
Yeah, it is 20 foot wide. It's a 20 foot wide, basically sound gap. There's 2 walls between where this would be and the neighbor, the flower gallery's 3rd floor, which I believe they use for storage. I'm not certain, but I know they don't actually occupy it for business. And then on the other side is Rexall Pharmacy. But if you go out and look on the roof, there is actually about a 6 foot walkway. So I've got my exterior wall and they've got theirs on the 3rd floor. So I'm not gonna be directly wall to wall with any other business.
If the conditional use permit is approved, what recourse would neighbors have if things are not going as well as you hope them to? That's probably it.
I get the complaints and I get the right to do the investigation.
So I think
If she refuses, then I have to go through the administrative search warrant. I don't really come to that, but
But I think one of the concerns that we've had in the past, and this is more of a, on the residential side, is that we've had a citizen who was neighbor to somebody that was not a good steward of their animals and found the complaint process to be very non-satisfying because there wasn't the recourse, there wasn't the traction that they had hoped for in being able to address the concerns that were voiced understandably with their neighbor. And I can appreciate some of the reservation that neighbors now may have if they feel like that complaint-driven response may not give them the traction or the satisfaction that they're looking for. If the complaint's legitimate, I mean, not just to complain, but the citizen that I'm thinking of had very valid concerns voiced and really struggled to achieve any real meaningful satisfaction from those. And it's only a matter of fate ultimately to relieve the issue. Perhaps the city could have responded after some time, but we hadn't as a body been able to do that to that point.
It's a little different now, with the kind of changing of some of the ordinances, and that was a unique situation too, in that it wasn't necessarily Bruno that was involved in that. That was like calls from law enforcement, and there were some issues there. There were also issues with that household not being good stewards, and if there's something happened, people coming and picking the dogs up so that those dogs weren't available to be inspected. So it's a little bit different now.
Okay.
And also with, when we changed the breed specific ordinance, when we got rid of the breed specific ordinances, the onus was really put on municipal court and law enforcement to make sure that we're enforcing that everyone is a good owner, not necessarily who has what we consider bad breed. So Megan takes that very serious. I do as well. Come into municipal court almost any month and got animal issues there. So I think for the citizens at large, that process is improved upon and better. We also, to be perfectly honest with you, Megan, my court clerk, keeps a pretty close eye on animal control as well, just to make sure that everything's going the way it should, because that is something she's very vested in as well.
But this wouldn't be specifically an animal control issue. This would also become then a zoning or a
Sure.
more.
Yeah, sometimes when law enforcement's called regarding animals, that's the first person who's going to respond. So when Bruno talks about police or whoever, it's gonna be animal control. But depending on what the complaint is, but yeah, it could also end up in Bruno's lap to deal with some zoning stuff and the permit, stuff like that.
I want there to be an opportunity for business to succeed, but I also want there to be opportunity for issues to be addressed when they exist. And I'm not sure where that, if we're able to achieve that, or what we would need to do to modify the conditional use permit to achieve that. Or is that where we would send it back to the planning commission to spell out that process?
I had a question, is the only way that you can access this upper level with the dogs is up the stairs?
No, I also have an elevator.
Okay.
It's an English bulldog owner question. Sounds like.
I was gonna say, I got one that can get up the steps and the other one's gonna be like, I guess we're going down here now.
Will remind you, you have the opportunity to add or take away conditions if you so choose. And as the memo says, to overrule the planning commission's recommendation, you have to have a 2/3 majority vote. So it takes, to disapprove that recommendation, you have to have a 4-1 vote. A 3-2 vote against the conditional use would still happen. Because you have to have a supermajority vote to override the planning commission's recommendation. That would be true the opposite way too. Unless there was a protest petition. If there's a protest petition, it's a no-brainer. It's got to be 4-1 to approve. But it only has to be a simple 3-2 with a recommendation. But it has to be a supermajority to overrule it.
Is there an opportunity, I don't know if this is too Pollyanna, is there an opportunity to bring in the neighbors and negotiate favorable terms? I mean, I think that kind of goes along with, you know, they knew the certain set of zoning when they rules when they went into this. Now things are changing. Is there a way to have a constructive conversation where they don't feel like it's where they
I
can,
think that's what the public hearing process is about.
but is it, I mean,
That's why you get conditions or no conditions or
Okay.
any conditions.
but now that there's been some dust that's settled, is there opportunity to revisit with them about, you know, what type of conditions would make them comfortable? I mean, I agree with having the opportunity to have a conditional use permit. I wonder if there might be some more opportunity to discuss with them some conditions that would make them more comfortable with the situation, given that there's been some time. Not to kick this down the road too long. I know you want to get started, but
What you would probably have to do in that situation to not violate the Open Meetings Act.
Yeah.
Is that what I would suggest is if that's something that the commission wants to do, we would have to table it perhaps to the next meeting. And let people know if you have a concern or want to talk about this, you know, then we can have that discussion at that point in time. Essentially set out, hey, but if you're not going to show up, this is your time. If you're not going to show up, then we'll move forward without your feedback. Because, you know,
That's what the public hearing process is for, is to take the burden off of you guys. You guys appoint these planning commission to go fight those battles for you and have those discussions. And that's why everybody within 200 feet gets a personal letter from me saying, this is coming, here's the notice, this is the day, show up if you got your opinion. And that's what happens, and then it goes to you. So if we do this, it's like having a second public hearing, which is fine. But if you think more discussion needs to be had, it maybe have to be thrown back to the planning commission. I don't know, but we can have it at the city commission level if you want.
yeah, I don't think necessarily has to write a planning commission because we can put certain things into that conditional use permit. For example,
Correct.
if you guys are like, hey, why don't we give this X amount of time to see how it goes? And then we come back and revisit it. that's something that's doable. So I don't think we necessarily have to push it back. And I think if we push it back to the planning commission, no offense to them, it's gonna take longer. Because
It will take
their meeting, it has to come back out here,
Yeah,
so
That's true.
just in the interest of spiking and not having to wait forever, well. We need a slow return as well.
So we could do it like a trial period, like
We do that.
6 months, see how it goes, make sure all conditions are met.
Yeah, you could, and then we could revisit it at that time.
6 months. Now you have to understand, she has to qualify for a license to be able to do this. And that's going, she's gonna be inspected by a licensed veterinarian. So that 6 months from now, would I be the one going there? Or would we say licensed veterinarian, you're gonna go in there and make sure she's meeting all state law? But I'm gonna make sure she meets the conditions, which would be to me the smell and the noise, which is fine, I can do it. But I wanna kind of know my parameters as far as,
I think that the concerns that I'm hearing aren't specifically related to adhering to state laws or not. The concerns that I'm hearing pertain to what would probably fall under the category of nuisance complaints. So
eventually become nuisances.
it sounds like that would be squarely in your lap. Which I mean, monthly checks, does that mean that we charge Bruno with talking with the neighbors on a monthly basis to see how we are? Does that mean that, if I were in your shoes and this were approved, I would probably want to have some sort of camera and audio equipment that would help demonstrate that, oh my gosh, this dog was barking nonstop from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock. I can demonstrate that that was not the case, or that was the case.
I already have the cameras and the audio equipment purchased. Because owners want to check in and know, or if anything happens, I want it documented for my business insurance.
Have you specifically talked to your neighbors and shown them exactly what you're planning on?
Yeah, they were here at the planning commission meeting and she actually said she felt a lot better about it. The ones who had the complaints and wrote the letters. She actually voiced, I think Bruno remembers, that she felt a lot better about it after hearing how I was going to set it up and how I was planning to handle it all. So I think that's probably why we don't have a petition against it sitting here right now. Just because she was the one with the main concern and she felt more at ease with it once she heard all the details of it.
So what about the new business that's going into?
I've talked to the owner of the building, not specifically about this, but I've talked to her about, this is what I do and, this is what I'm hoping for. And she thought it sounded great. I haven't talked to the people that are actually going to be renting the building from her. They're still under construction. And I haven't run into them. I don't know who they are.
So would the notices have gone to not the occupants necessarily, but the owners of the buildings?
Owners are always owners.
Okay, so because I just didn't know if by chance she would have been included in that, but probably not as a tenant. Because it would still be in that similar area.
They should have. When an owner receives those kind of notifications.
Yeah, we could probably stop.
Should.
Should is an awfully big word.
Should, right, huge word, yes.
What about the odors? How do you control that?
Clean a lot, constantly, cleaning and sanitizing.
So does the waste all go down there?
The solids don't go down the drain because you can't put solids down a drain unless it's like a toilet where you can
Yeah.
flush. We pick up the solids, we double bag them, and they go out in the dumpster, and I have weekly trash service.
And you have your own
Yes.
dumpster?
Yes.
Because I'm thinking, the new business is clothing.
Mm.
And I'm not sure she'd want odors.
I
You
don't
know.
like those kind of odors either.
You
So
know,
I'm very picky about it.
it would probably be, in my opinion, a good idea to talk to her and, because she's in business now.
Right.
So, you know,
Well, she hasn't opened up yet, so I don't,
no.
or
I
are they
mean,
moving from a
she's-
different place?
Yeah, she's
I don't even
across-
know who.
She's across the street.
Oh,
now.
okay.
So she is gonna, it said she was gonna, they were gonna be closed the last week of August, so.
Oh.
You'll need to talk to her before that, but, just so she has an idea what she's getting into.
Business is moving from across the street to the old Rexall building, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So there's gonna be a new business in there,
But they have to remodel it.
and it's a rental, right? They have to
Yeah,
rent that.
they rent.
Yeah.
Sounded like.
Well, they would have, were they renting a space across the street? Okay, so they wouldn't have got notified anyway.
I didn't know when I just briefly looked at the map. I didn't know if that was done.
They
I
probably would have been in the 200 feet area. I'm guessing, but they weren't, they don't own it, so they wouldn't know about it anyway.
Yeah.
So it's over.
Are there trash receptacles that would help reduce the opportunity for odors to drift?
Every time a dog, if it's solid feces, we pick it up with poop bags and then they go into another bag after that. And they go into a trash can with a lid on it until it's, you know, we take it out every day or sooner if it needs it.
Okay.
But if you walked into my salon right now or anywhere through the building, you wouldn't find an odor anywhere.
So how do we get to add things to the conditional use permit?
You can do it through a motion, but you got to decide how you want to word the condition. You can just approve the ordinance with the added conditions or subtract the condition. You have to specifically word, so Stacy.
Yeah, you make the motion with the as amended, essentially, and then you vote on it as amended, and then it would be documented in that conditional use permit.
I guess if you wanted to decide on adding a condition or two or three, you could decide to do that. Decide how you word it and decide if you want to vote for it with the amended conditions. It's negotiable, I don't know.
I would feel more comfortable moving forward if we had monthly reviews of any and all complaints, whether they were substantiated or not. Some limit as to how many substantiated complaints are received before the conditional use permit is rescinded. Word that appropriately.
Yeah, you could potentially, you know, if you're wanting to do a monthly inspection like Bruno or a walkthrough, you know, we could put in something along those lines that, and you could even tailor it to be within a certain time. So a monthly walkthrough with Bruno for the next 6 months. And then what I would suggest doing is that, you know, after, if there are substantiated complaints, you can put a number on there, or you can say substantial or significant number of complaints. You know, then it can be brought back to explore, you know, conditional use permits further. Or you could simply just just say this conditional use permit is good for the next 6 months. With Bruno doing monthly walkthroughs. And then it's revisited in 6 months with the with the power to be able to come back before that if there are significant issues. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. It's kind of just how you guys want to do it. You can put a time period on it. I don't think it would. Do I think Bruno and Spikeman probably want to have to do monthly walkthroughs forever? Probably not. But if we want to put it, and then after that, or we can even put, monthly for a certain period of time, and then there'll be.
Can we do a
Every 3
review,
months
like
or
6
6
months, do a monthly walkthrough for the first 6 months, and in 6 months, do a report or review or something to you, but you'll probably be hearing about it before then, if there's a lot of complaints anyway, but.
Would you like some
And then
language
from
on that?
there, decide if you want to do monthly again, or.
Well, see, I
6
think
months.
a review at 6 months or upon receiving 3 substantiated complaints. Right, and I think a substantiated complaint with all of them. I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, but I'm trying to find a way to where you're able to move forward with your business and we're able to address the concerns of the neighbors.
Do we want to come back and revisit it after 6 months, or are we approving?
Or have a-
Okay, so here's suggested language for you. Are you ready?
I'm sorry.
Are you ready for some suggested language then? So we'd be adding condition number 5 to the conditional use permit. Applicant will be subject to monthly inspections by the building inspector for 6 months, at which time the city commission will review a report of the inspections or upon receiving 3 substantial complaints, will review the conditional use permit. Does that work?
That sounds good. Does that get what you wanted?
Yeah, I think it's an effort to try to promote you doing what you want to do, but also helping to protect the neighbors from their concerns with noise or odor. And if there's no issues, there's no issues. Great, let's move on. If there are issues, we're able to address them in a very timely manner, because I think the idea of a neighbor ultimately being subjected to 6 months if business isn't being taken care of is far too long. And so
And
we're
it's hurting their business.
right. So we want to be able to address issues in a very timely manner, in a very concrete way, where there's not a lot of room for interpretation. If you're doing what you need to be doing, there shouldn't be complaints. If there are complaints that aren't substantiated, then that directs our attention elsewhere. If there are complaints that are substantiated, that directs our attention to your business.
Right.
And we're able to address whatever we need to address in a timely, prudent way.
This will be good. You get to play the dog.
It's been a hard time replacing my dog. Last time I put my dog down, too heartbreaking, I can't replace it.
I find it unusual that you want to do a boarding business. And I know you said in bigger areas, they don't have the outside runs, and it makes it less liable for you to not take them outside. But we are in rural Kansas and our dogs do know outside. So I'm just having a hard time with, and I've heard great things about your grooming business, don't get me wrong, and I'm all for bringing new businesses or opportunities to our city. But I'm just having a hard time with a boarding business in our downtown area with no potty areas or walking space.
But there are potty areas and play space. It's just not conventional, but everything can be worrisome and scary when it's new and it's unfamiliar.
I think both sides of the coin are very valid. But I think that there are communities in urban areas where this is a very common experience. I think in a rural community, it's a bit of a stretch for us to kind of picture that. So I don't, and both points have very good.
Conditional use permits are always like this a lot of times, unless it's something pretty. Most conditional use permits are dealing with issues that need conditions. I guess you could say.
So point of clarification, Bruno, it would take 4 of us voting against the planning commission recommendation to turn it down.
To turn it down.
Right.
A
But we can-
3-2 vote against does not, then it goes through.
So I guess my quick question would be, is there a way to take an informal vote to determine whether we have the 4 votes that would turn this down, which would ultimately negate any further conversations about how to modify the recommendation? And if there's not the 4, then we move forward with trying to figure out how to modify the recommendation, or we simply table it and send it back to the planning commission for them to figure it out. I mean, those
Can we
are-
just amend it?
You can amend it. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
amend
Just
it.
amend.
Let's just
You
amend
can
it.
add a deal, have language written down to you.
Sure.
That would require the
I
monthly
just-
inspections for 6 months or 3 complaints, you review the CUP at that point in time. So if you want to add that in, you can. If you want something different, we can.
Sure. I mean, that fits for what I was wanting. I just was thinking that if I'm the only person that's gonna say, yeah, let's give it a shot, and the other 4 are gonna say no, then there's really no use in preparing additional language. If that's not the case, then I guess I'm wondering that. At any point, I would entertain a motion to either approve this ordinance, so we can vote it up or down as amended. I've heard that yet, so I'm not sure.
I think you have to go through and just vote. I don't think you get to take any formal vote to see how the.
Yeah, I mean,
formal vote's gonna
essentially.
happen.
doing a
Well,
whole
I'll make the
amendment.
motion. I move to approve ordinance 2021-3181 as amended.
With option 5,
Adding option 5, the applicant will be subject to monthly inspections by the building inspector for 6 months. The city commission will review a report of the inspections at the end of 6 months, or upon receiving 3 substantiated complaints, whichever occurs first.
it's been moved. I would second the motion. Moved by Commissioner Hash, seconded by Commissioner Lamberts, to approve ordinance 2021-3181 as amended. Is there further discussion?
I'm gonna weigh in real quick. If you vote for this, then it will go as amended. If you vote this down, then
Then you could do a straight vote in favor of the CUP or denial.
yes.
Or propose another amendment. Or you could table it. You have lots of choices.
Just so you know, all the opportunities.
Just confused me.
It's been moved and seconded. So if this doesn't pass, then the conditional use permit as presented is still up for vote.
Somebody could make a motion to vote on it without an amendment, yes.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. So the motion does not pass.
That voted against.
That'd be second.
Marcia, Ashley, and Virginia voted nay. Christine, I voted yes. So at this point, I would entertain a motion for the conditional use permit as presented.
Yes, because we tried to amend it in the amendment, the conditional use permit with the amendment failed. So now what they're doing is a vote of what was presented. from planning commission. That has to be the
You gotta get somebody that.
Yeah,
It's not.
I can see.
it was different. It was different because that was, the way I look at it is it was an amendment, so we changed it to override. No, it's different now because.
Can we discuss it a little more?
We could table it.
Or table it and
Bring that next time.
I think I'd like to table it and see if there are any efforts that can be made to get the neighbors on board. If there are any efforts that we can at least get to some, I know there's,
Yeah.
it's kind of, at this point, it's hearsay that they said they were okay with it because we obviously have heard the opposite after that. So
I did hear
Well,
from a
it's not
planning
hearsay
commission
because
member
what was
that,
done, what was said, excuse me, it's not hearsay because what was said in a public hearing.
okay,
Now, what's going on the street could be hearsay.
sure.
what they witnessed was if during a public hearing, and they did soften their stance, and she did seem acceptable of that. That's a fact. I witnessed that. Eric, or not Eric, did, Megan did too.
Okay,
And
but
so did the planning commission.
yeah, but the issue at hand is that there doesn't seem to necessarily be that. Is there an opportunity to work in the next couple of weeks to find conditions that would be favorable?
I would certainly entertain a motion to table this discussion for further meeting.
I would
At our
move to
next
table
meeting.
this discussion to a further meeting so that it's not a denial that it has to wait a year. Is that how long it would have to wait? Is a year?
Correct.
Right. I would like that extra time.
Fair enough. Motion's been made to delay, to table this for
To
next.
the next meeting.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Hutchinson, second by Commissioner Wentz to table ordinance 2021-3181 for our next scheduled meeting. Is there any further discussion?
So what you were saying is it failed before, now it's being tabled for the ordinance as presented?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, so that makes sense.
The
'cause
amended,
otherwise-
the amended motion failed.
Okay.
Failed, yeah, so that's all off the table.
When's the next meeting?
I wouldn't know.
Bring it back.
I won't be here. I'll be at a footlight conference.
I thought if we just table it for a month, then. That makes sense? You said you won't be here?
I won't be here September 1. I got a floodplain conference.
Will that be the 15th, 14th?
Or no,
Would be the 15th, would be the next one. I remember.
Amend your motion to be agreeable to the motion. 15th meeting.
Yes.
Okay, the motion as amended is to table ordinance 2021-3181 for the September 15th meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. So it sounds like in the meantime, we can try to have conversations with the neighbors and the owner of the Downtown Girls, I believe is the shop's name, that's gonna be moving next door. And hopefully there will be some fruit that'll be born from those conversations. That'll help provide or address some of the concerns that have been voiced.
All right.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Moving on to the manager's report.
Short.
Big threat over here to keep this short. Just thank you all of you for showing up Saturday evening and helping out with the 150th celebration. I think your presentation was very well done. I was pleased with the attendance. Informal count, we served about 300 meals that evening, and we had several other 100 people that went through the park earlier that day with all the different activities. Everyone who committed to something showed up on time and did their job, so it made it very successful. The weather was beautiful. No fights broke out. No one got injured. So we're going to call it a success. That was great. So thank you very much for celebrating with us. We also received an invitation to the college president's soiree on September 10th. And they asked that I share that invitation with you. So I'll be giving you the details on Friday notes email. So please do RSVP so we can let them know if you plan to attend. And the final thing I wanted to share is this morning late, we got word that there was a meeting at the Co-op Distribution Center about a program called HOME. It's an acronym, and it's a joint effort between the Kansas Department of Transportation and Kansas Department of Agriculture to support a lot of different things. And so what they discussed today was building the middle mile of broadband infrastructure along Highway 81 from Salina to at least Belleville, possibly north to the Nebraska line. There's some conflicting maps, so we're not sure exactly where that's going to go. The whole plan's a little bit malleable, but KDOT would put that backbone in, and that would be a 7-duct conduit with 2 of the fibers being owned and operated by KDOT and the other 5 up for lease by private internet service providers or public entities if they need it. So the idea is to help internet service providers reduce the cost to end users by putting in that middle mile stretch. They're going to be putting hand boxes in at every mile, so every county road would have a handhold in it that the internet service provider can then connect and go down that county road toward a residence. toward a farmstead. The Kansas Department of Ag component is that they would agree to this pilot program to pay the internet service provider monthly fee to provide internet to ag production fields, where they partnered with another company that would put some probe monitors in the soil to monitor for healthy soil conditions, providing feedback to the producer on water content and mineral content. And it appeared from the discussion today that that was primarily targeted towards supporting carbon markets. I hadn't heard of what a carbon market was today, but it's when businesses want to work toward being carbon neutral. And so they measure the amount of carbon emissions from their factory, for example, and then they would partner with an ag producer to say, your field is a carbon sink, so can we lease a portion of your field to attract that carbon? And then that's how the company could then claim that they are carbon neutral, if that makes sense. So it's kind of interesting. It was a little bit new to me, so I hope I'm explaining that correctly. But that would create additional opportunity for revenue for producers. It's like having another lease on their property. So anyway, that meeting is happening. Those discussions are occurring. There'll be a meeting on September 8th back there in Concordia, an all day long building meeting that will discuss that ag component of that program. And again, the program is pretty malleable, still in the planning stages, but so definitely supported by the Kansas Department of Transportation. They foresee being able to build out these broadband backbones is also helping out with future modes of transportation and how transportation is used. So if you think right now how your car may be able to connect with Wi-Fi somehow, some way, or as you're using your GPS, the future is going to be using a lot more of that. The future is going to be with precision agriculture and being able to use the internet where they're using satellites right now to be able to use their equipment in a more efficient manner. So it was kind of interesting to hear about that, how that could impact. Highway 81 is one location for the pilot. The other one is out further in western Kansas on US Highway 83. Those were both chosen because they are considered primary freight corridors for the Kansas Department of Transportation. So that's how they were chosen. Pretty interesting. That's all that I have to share with you today. Do you have any questions?
Staff reports?
Yeah, I just want to mention that next week, early in the week, they turn it out.
Awesome.
Open that phase, it's 3 and 4 and 5. Finish up striping. See today. Tuesday, had a hearing before district court regarding the eminent domain petition, and it was granted. Had to kind of lay out the procedure, and there's a lot of procedurally, there's a lot of things that we have to do prior. We did all of those, some were mentioned earlier, and they were something going in. I mean, we would end up having to do because there was information that just was not provided to us. But that was all taken care of. Next step in the process is the judge is awaiting the journal entry. The journal entry is drafted. The most important part is we have to name 3 appraisers, and appraisers are not the easiest folks to come by. Guardian ad litem in this case, when she did one, she used 3 appraisers. 2 of them are retired and 1's deceased. So, but the nice thing per statute is we have to have 3 people, but 2 of them have to have, they don't necessarily have to be licensed appraisers. They just have to have experience in appraising. I don't know what that necessarily means, but so I'm hoping maybe a real estate agent or somebody. So I've got a few people that I've left messages for. As soon as I can get them appointed, then it will be filed. And at that point in time, they have an oath and a bunch of different more paperwork that has to be done. And the clock starts ticking. They get 45 days to appraise, and then there will be a public hearing, probably just piggyback it on the city council meeting, at which point in time, if anyone has any objections or issues with valuation, that they can discuss. If there aren't any, it's not an open and closed type of public hearing, at which point in time that valuation along with the journal entries will be sent to the judge, and then the process is close to over. I anticipate, and I don't think it's necessarily an optimistic anticipation, I barring any issues, we're just now into August. So worst case scenario, they're done with all their stuff in November. gosh, that would be if we gave it to them in October, I'm sorry, mid-October probably. So I hope by the end of the year, this would all be done, so. And a lot of the time, especially something like this, it's not gonna take 45 days to get it done, so as soon as that's done, we ship it up to district court.
Other staff reports?
Okay, so did you want to share final pool numbers?
As you can see, income was up over the previous 8 years, I believe. It doesn't reflect on the punch cards and passes, so I'm assuming that there's a lot more $2 people that came in. Attendance was up over the past several years, except for 2018. But sure we had double from the slide. And then obviously concessions up over last year, but that was a short year. I think our concessions are successful. It was a little slow on the purchases of things this year, but that was due to the first year doing rec desk, and I think people were a little confused about that. I think next year will be better. Punch cards and passes are all sold on there and not, they don't receive something physical. But I think that'll go really good next year. Full managers thought it was a successful year.
Thanks. Did you compile this report?
Yeah, but it's something I've done for every year since
Oh,
then.
okay.
So
I don't remember seeing it
Oh,
before.
okay.
It's,
I think I usually
Thank
put it
you.
in the packet at the end of the season. I don't know if I did last year or not. But that's good.
Other staff reports? Hearing none, commissioners? Marcia, pick on you.
I want to thank the 150th committee for the celebration. I think it went well, seemed to. Also want to thank Amber for the audit, doing a good job. Never having any problems with our audit. I think that says a lot for our staff.
I just wanna, Marcia kind of took mine. Thank you, Amber, for doing a great job. And everybody for doing the 150th. I had nothing but positive feedback from that, so that was great. We made it to the ending, so. Great job to everybody. Also want to thank Amy. I always ask her questions on certain texts that are written, and she always gets back to me very, very quickly with very detailed explanations, which I really appreciate. So thank you for all my nonsense.
All good question. Christie?
I have nothing to add. Thanks. Thanks to the Sesquicentennial Committee. It was fun. It was a pleasant day. Couldn't have asked for better in August, so it was great.
Yeah.
I would say the same thanks. I also want to extend an invitation or appreciation for my invitation to take part in the Sesquicentennial Pickleball tournament. I have some pickleball paddles on their way. I enjoyed it thoroughly. So thank you, Toby, for the invitation. Also had a lot of compliments on how well the cornhole tournament was ran. So appreciate that, Chris. Was able to take part in a couple games, volleyball Thursday before the weather shut us out. And really have just heard a lot of positive things about the increase in recreational opportunities that we have here. And people are really enjoying that. So thanks for all your work there. All I have. So anything else? Been moved by Commissioner Hash, second by Commissioner Hutchinson to adjourn. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye, all opposed, same sign.